Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Joe Lowery. No British accent, so I'm not Ryan Bailey. No long, eloquent introduction, so I'm not Taylor Rockwell. Graham never does the intro, so I'm not Graham. I am Joe Lowery, and today I am joined by a man who will be at bar trivia 30 years from now, anticipating the long-awaited question of who scored the first Club World Cup goal of any team in history, and he'll answer triumphantly, Christian Roldan. It is Jeff Rueter. Jeff, how are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm appreciating the kind of workman-like introduction that you gave too. There's no hands up in the air and jubilation. There's no throw of the voice. This is like a working man, fullback, hard-nosed midfielder, just here to put in a shift. And Joe, that's why we all love you. So thanks for keeping me around. It's great.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you, Jeff, and that's not just because no one else could show up today. We really are thrilled to have you. I'd like to think of myself as sort of the Christian Roldan of this show. That's Graham. It's not me. Let's move on swiftly from all of that. Before we get to today's show and the real meat of it, where we're going to talk about the three MLS teams in their opening Club World Cup games, we're going to take a look around the regular season and the big news and stories coming out of Major League Soccer proper as well. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. You can come hang out with us, bonus stuff over there. You can hop in our Discord, where I've heard all the cool kids are hanging out. And I know that's true, Jeff, or it will be once listener comes and hangs out with us, because you're in the Discord. And if you want to hang out and chat with Jeff and me, if you like, go check out Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Jeff, let's get to the meat of today's episode, which is your trip to Seattle. Now, this is not quite the meat, but we are going to talk about Jeff's trip to Seattle.
I've got my slideshow ready to go. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Please click through. I want to see every picture, every beach picture.
Right.
I'm assuming you saw whales, all that good stuff. Jeff, you were in Seattle for the Seattle Sounders 2-1 loss to Botafogo in their opener of the Club World Cup group stage. I'm curious. I've never been to a Club World Cup game before because this tournament in its current form never existed. What was the experience like? Did it feel like a normal going to a normal MLS game in Seattle? Like what was this like for you?
Well, I would say it didn't feel like a normal sort of domestic league matchup of any kind, USL and WSL, anything, because I think that you sort of take for granted in a nation this large, like the concept of away travel. Like it's always a bit of a novelty, right? Where you'll see, especially if it's traveling more than one state border, right? Like it's one thing when the Timbers come to Lumen Field, right? Because that is going to be a rivalry game. There's history with that. There's the regional, whatever with Seattle and Portland. Okay, so that's one thing. But if you have Minnesota United sending fans or fans of Minnesota United you're getting a couple dozen maybe, right? And so it's cool. You'll see it on the Apple broadcast and they'll hold up and they'll be like, oh, and look at these brave souls who are ready for the 3-0 defeat or whatever, right? Like they'll have their own moment. But, Sunday morning, game is on a Sunday evening, right? Sunday morning, I go to the market. I'm only human.
Classic.
I take my coffee there. I walk through. I
watch him huck some fish around
salmon.
the market. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm only mortal, right?
Yeah.
And I saw one vendor with Sounders gear. His name is Hugh. He sells saffron. And he was very excited. He said that he was not going to the game that night because of work, and he only had recently bought tickets for Thursday when the prices dropped, and he had been on the fence about going.
Nice.
A man of the people, right? Like, okay, that's all of us. But you look around, and the number of Botafogo jerseys and shirts and hats at this market was like more than the in-stadium away support. And again, this is no slight. This is a reality of how large the country plus Canada is. But wow, they sent a lot of fans. There was a ton of support for Botafogo around the city. And you could look, and River Plate was playing at Lumen Field in the later days. And there was a lot of River Plate around the city as well. And so, there is something that, you go through the lead up of covering this tournament. And all of us at The Athletic are as guilty of this as anyone. And you're just like, okay, who's going to watch this? Who is this for? This seems like a bit of a forced enterprise. Like, I'm not really sure why we're covering this with the seriousness, but then you look at how much this means to so many people, and it's just like, okay, maybe there is some version. I don't think it's in its current calibration. I don't think it's a 32-team tournament that you just kind of tell countries they have to host, and you put it in the biggest venues that aren't going to be realistic draws. I don't think that that's the solution, so there's a lot to tinker with here. But I do think that, in theory, fans of South American teams want to see how they would fare against North American teams, especially European teams. North American teams want to see what the balance is. I think that there is this curiosity. It's the sort of thing that we talk about, right? Like at games in the stands at halftime, whatever, is like, okay, so how would, how many MLS teams would maybe avoid relegation, right, from the Premier League, or would anyone win the championship, stuff like that. Like, it is a way to see that, and it is also at times an entertaining way to see that. So so that was cool. That was probably my biggest takeaway, was it actually seems like fans of Botafogo and River Plate in particular were very excited about the concept of this, and with Boca Juniors, like we saw last night as well. There's appetite for it.
And even another MLS game that had an MLS team playing effectively in their home market, that Miami Al Ahly game, which we'll get to later, it seemed like a big chunk of that crowd, and Henry Bushnell had a post on this a post on social media about this. It seemed like a big part of that crowd was there for Al Ahly and was not there for Lionel Messi. And the color shading between the lighter red of Al Ahly and the pink of Miami, not all that drastic, but it sure looked like there was red and a lot of it in that crowd. It's a great shout, Jeff. The thing that I can most closely equate this to, and I'm guessing most listeners have been to more soccer games than me, which I know seems like a weird thing to say for the host of a soccer podcast, but usually I'm watching games from my couch. The thing that this reminds me of most is MLS Cup, right? And I've been in Seattle for an MLS Cup against Toronto FC, and fans travel for MLS Cup. Or in Portland, when NYCFC fans traveled in droves for MLS Cup. You do get that kind of stuff, but it is usually only for that game, right? For the most important game of the season, not for what is effectively the least important game of a Club World Cup tournament, right? The first one is the least important one. So I think that's a great take. I am curious on your part, Jeff, from your experience, because from my couch, watching the games in this tournament, I've been actually pleasantly impressed by the crowds, and maybe that's because we heard so much drama about the ticketing stuff that is well warranted, by the way, the FIFA approach pricing those. The crowd in Seattle for this 2-1 loss to Botafogo looked legit. I mean, what was that like? What was the atmosphere like inside the stadium?
Yeah, they announced 30,000, and I think, speaking with local writers up in the press box there, the assumption is that's turnstile, because I think that if you're going to go purely off tickets disseminated, like, there would be more, right? Yeah. So attendance might actually be an accurate snapshot for this tournament, which is going to be really useful, because I don't think that we've seen a lot of those bogey games yet. Like, they were working overtime, right? Handing out pretty much buy one, get four free tickets for $20 to college kids, right, in Miami. And they weren't doing any of that sort of make up for lost time and suddenly let's make this thing affordable work in Seattle that I could see. Yes, there were with fans and moving them out of certain sections that wouldn't be in the broadcast view. But I was, and partial refunds silently being issued for fans who bought on day one. But beyond that, I don't think that there was really that same sort of okay, let's go to the colleges, let's go to the local, adult soccer leagues and hand them groups of tickets or anything like that. So everyone who was there, it looked like they had a clear allegiance. Maybe that's an important thing. And so then, when Seattle opens the game and is holding its own, and then when Seattle, after Roldan's goal and for the final 15 minutes, putting on ample pressure throughout, you could really feel that sort of shift. Whereas when Botafogo was in control, it was still more of that the home team isn't doing well and it's a little eerie in here. And yes, there's a pocket of fans who are cheering quite loudly, but it is more overshadowed by the silence around it, right? So there was still a good atmosphere for it. It was a really good game, to be fair. And I think that that's the other thing that's kind of my biggest takeaway is I was very impressed because coming into this tournament, the assumption was that the Seattle Sounders were going to be the team that would struggle the most because they were the one that had the fewest sort of game-breaking factors at this point. They didn't have a Denny Bouanga that could play against pretty much any defense in the world and still have his opportunities, right? Whether or not he makes them is one thing. That's always his thing with Denny Bouanga, but at the same point, he'll get his looks, right? And with Miami, of course, you've got Messi and a player who very clearly can still thwart defenses on a daily basis. Seattle didn't have either of those things, and yet I thought that they looked very composed. I thought that the midfield partnership of Obed Vargas and Christian Roldan, that thing plays really, really well. I still think that there's a version of Seattle that maybe in this was a good lesson that Joao Paulo might still have a role to play for 15 minutes here or there just to fortify, right? I still don't really see what Ryan Kent offered at left wing, and it was very interesting to watch in person the Seattle Sounders because I'd always kind of had this thing that one of them, if Ferreira is going to be on the right, he's going to want his touches, he's going to be on the ball. You need someone who's more comfortable off the ball on the left. This is where your Schaffelbergs and your Fafa Picots, whatever, become cult heroes, among the data hive because they do so much to open up space, right? And so my thought was that you need more of that on the left. And it wasn't until Paul Rothrock came in the 71st minute that things really started escalating for Seattle. So I'm only more fervent that Ryan Kent is kind of like, in NBA terms, it's always like your second point guard. You want him to be probably one of your 5 best players on your team because he still needs to run the offense for parts of it while your main guy is getting a breather. I think same sort of thing. It doesn't matter if he's one of your 5 best forwards. I don't think he works in combination very well with Rusnak and Ferreira. And so I think that once Rothrock came on, you were able to see that. All of the players, by the way, were like very vocal. Like, I hope the grass stays. They were very happy about the quality of the grass on the field at Lumen. It had been out for about a week. They had laid it, I think, the previous weekend. And so it had time to settle in. There weren't obvious seams and stitching like you saw at Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta for the LAFC Chelsea game. I might be the only person in the world who called that the LAFC Chelsea game and not vice versa.
I'm right here with you, Jeff. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I mean, I think you're right to be impressed with Seattle. Like that was my big takeaway from this game, was that the Seattle Sounders are very good. This is not new information, but I do think the rest of the league watched this game and thought, yep, all right, we know what we have to deal with when it comes to Seattle at this point. Now, I think there's a tendency to look at Botafogo as the team that won Copa Libertadores, and they did. That's how they get to this competition. Right. And it's a tendency to look at them as, oh, they're the shining stars of Brazil. That's not the case anymore. They're currently 8th in the league. Yeah. Flamengo are very much out in front in Brazil at the moment. This is a good but not great Brazilian top flight team. And I think in some senses that's the version of the Sounders that we caught, even though I am very high on them out of this game. And I think this is a statement of how impressed I was. I did sort of wonder what we would have seen from Seattle if they'd had Jordan Morris healthy, or what we would have seen from Seattle if they'd had Yaimar healthy at the back, because both of Botafogo's goals in the first half of this game come off of aerial balls into the box, and I don't think you get the same aerial ability from Kim Ki-hee as you do from Yaimar Gomez-Andrade in the back line for Brian Smetzer. So I don't think this was
35.
No, certainly not, right? And Yaimar's no spring chicken either, but still, I think Seattle left something on the table in this game, which is actually super impressive. And I think everybody's looking at this as, wow, this Seattle team was kind of in this game, rather than, oh, what a missed opportunity. And that's still how I'm looking at it. I think instead it is a credit to Seattle that thought even kind of enters my mind. They couldn't dig themselves out of that 2-goal hole they found themselves in after 44 minutes. But they made a legit push. And even with the game state wind, sort of the proverbial game state wind at their backs in this game, down 2 goals, really nothing to lose for Seattle, right? I mean, they're almost certainly going to get blitzed in the next 2 games against Atleti and PSG. This was the game. If they were going to win this game, this was it, right? So they don't really have anything to lose. They're not making a big goal differential play, most likely, in this group. But who knows? We'll see. But really, this was a moment where you just go for it. And Seattle kind of went for it. They had chances in the second half. They were very much back in this game. Roldan scores that kind of weird, dinky goal that gets them within 1. And there's still something left for them in this match. Even before the game state shifted, in the first, 20 minutes or so of this game, before Botafogo find their opener, I thought Seattle hung. Like I thought Seattle were very much in this game, where you look at the stats in the first half. Botafogo have 5 shots inside the box. 2 of those turn into goals. Seattle do have 3 shots, right? This was them, 3 shots inside the 18, excuse me. This was them finding real looks, at times controlling the game. They had more possession in the first half. Like, there was a lot to like about what Seattle threw in this match. Jeff, being there in the stadium, I'm curious for you, were there any players that really stood? You talked about the midfield kind of playing, right, between Obed Vargas and Christian Roldan. I thought Roldan wasn't quite at his best from minute 1, but very much rounded into this game.
Second half especially, yeah.
Was there anybody else who popped from Seattle in this game, or was it just taking in the wonders of Brian Schmetzer's tactical formula?
Yeah, I think it's funny because, like, the first 20 minutes, I was looking back at my notes from the game, and it's just like 5th minute, Obed Vargas takes ball off opponent, plays it up channel perfectly to Ferreira, who fires it over the bar. Like, Obed Vargas uses spin move to take ball off of Brazilian midfielder's foot, dribbles it forward himself, and then tries to make a pass that's intercepted in the box. Obed Vargas does it. It's just like he was everywhere. And I think that we'd been talking about him coming into the tournament as maybe, along with David Martinez, the MLS young players, especially outside of Miami, right? Because that's a more heavily scouted contingent, I would say, of young South American players. But like Obed Vargas and to a lesser extent David Martinez were the ones where it's like, okay, some teams might actually see them as a tournament and be like, oh, we might need to like up our scouting quota on MLS because this guy is, he has the sauce. And he really did. He came with it. He had a lot of energy. He was really up for the challenge. He had 100 touches in the game, one of just 2 players in either team who got that, along with Roldan, of course. So he really impressed me. I've been saying for about a year and a half now that I'm worried about Nuhu as a defender in a back four at left back. And the unspoken part, yes, Kim Ki-hee got skied for both. Nuhu Tolo was pretty directly at fault for the chances created that led to both of those goals. And that's... I don't know if Reed Baker-Whiting is going to be the answer. I frankly think that he has a little bit more of like defensive responsibility than Nuhu at this stage of his career, but Nuhu got found out in a really big way. The other one that really impressed me, though, Jackson Reagan, doing some just quiet Chad Marshall-like stuff. Just really well positioned to stop ball in the box or to poke it clear before it gets to the box, really measured with his decisions of when to recirculate versus when to advance the ball. So I think that Reagan and then Paul Rothrock off the bench, that really impressed. I will say, though, some credit to you. Pedro de la Vega's end product left a lot to be desired. And you could see it off the bench. Like, look, he's 8 for 8 with his passing in 19 minutes, which is really all you can do. But his shots, I think that usually when you see a player who comes in on a fee like his, who has a role as free and trusting of your instincts as it is often, you want to see a player who rewards that with just that sort of like clever decision and not doing the thing that I think I would do as I'm watching it play in real time, because I would like to think a playmaker thinks a bit quicker than I do, right? And that's humility on my part. But I think that you look, and both times it's just like, ball falls right to him. He's in a dangerous area. You just need to pass it to the corners of the net, and instead he just kind of shanks it and it bounces a couple times right to the goalkeeper, right? And it's just like, that is the difference between us saying the Sounders fought valiantly and still lost, and the Sounders fought valiantly and reclaimed a point. It is Pedro de la Vega's end service. It is Nuhu's defending. It is simple mistakes, which is a very good place for Seattle to be at this point. I think that they'll feel very good about where they're at the midpoint of their season. And then you get past this tournament, you get guys healthy. Jordan Morris over Danny Musovski, I think, will help a lot. It also opens up combinations if you want to get Ferreira as more of a deep-lying forward, and then you can have Morris playing off the left or the right wing. You can figure out the combinations again at that point. But, yeah, it just ultimately that lack of final product and that lack of decisiveness is ultimately what really held them back here.
Yeah, it was on the table for Seattle in this game.
Yeah.
Pedro de la Vega, I think about as the Tasmanian Devil from Looney Tunes, specifically that one, not just any Tasmanian Devil, where he comes in,
the famous
causes some
one,
chaos.
yeah.
A lot of the chaos works in his favor, right? And then just never delivers that final blow on Bugs Bunny. It just isn't going to happen. That's the Pedro de la Vega experience, and it is both a testament to Craig Weibel's roster build that this team is as good as they are without Pedro de la Vega, and a bit of a damnation of that decision to sign de la Vega, who...
Yeah.
I'm legitimately curious what popped about De La Vega in Argentina, because I watched a bunch of his tape and it just didn't hit for me. But there had to have been something, and you can see some of the gifts that he has, but the end product just has not come. Jeff, let's tie a bow on this experience. Mm-hmm. You're back from Seattle now, so we'll move ourselves on. Before we get to the rest of the Club World Cup chat, we're going to take a break. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. We have talked about the Seattle Sounders 2-1 loss to Botafogo. Let's move ourselves across the country to a game that Club Leon were supposed to be playing, much to the chagrin of their fans, who were still there, some of them, at Mercedes-Benz yesterday. LAFC, who lost 2-0 to Chelsea. Jeff, this was an experience watching this game. This was like a science experiment for me, which I think is really what the Club World Cup is for folks watching from an MLS perspective. Yeah. This was LAFC, like the LAFC that we know and love. God bless their hearts, right? Nathan Ordaz.
Los Angeles FC, right?
Los
it is Steve Cherundolo's Los Angeles Football Club.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so. Up against a really close to first choice Chelsea squad. Yeah. I'm curious, and this is maybe like the U.S. Switzerland test a little bit, because I was a little fearful of a reprise of another game of that similar scoreline where LAFC embody the U.S.'s bodies. And Chelsea end up as Switzerland. What did you expect from this game when you saw the lineup drop with some of those names that we've already mentioned? Did you expect a really lopsided game, and sort of what were your thoughts when you saw the lineup?
Maybe more lopsided than we got, to be fair.
Okay. Yeah, same here.
But at the same point, I think that the scoreline really flatters LAFC here. And I think that it played out much how I would expect. There was some indecisiveness. Cole Palmer is still sort of figuring out what he is at this stage of his career and how he fits in an Enzo Maresca system, right? And that was a story of the back half of last year's Premier League season, and I think that will continue to be closely monitored by Chelsea fans and pundits and everyone throughout this Club World Cup. I think it just reinforces that there is a limit. And the limit is you can't beat a Champions League qualifier from the Premier League, I guess. So I need to catch myself immediately before I take this too seriously. But there might be some limitations in the general way that LAFC sets up in 2025 and how comfortable they look in a turtle shell, I guess, is maybe a good way to frame it, because you look at, they've made some decisions, like in the middle of the season, they brought in Frankie Amaya, right, to be that sort of midfielder that can come in off the bench and change it. I don't know what he's really changing. I think that was something that was pretty found out between his time with Cincinnati and especially his second MLS stop with the New York Red Bulls, where it was just like, okay, we don't know if he's going to be that vital progressor. We don't know if he's going to be that good water carrier. Like, we're still trying to figure out how to get the best out of Frankie Amaya's skill set at the MLS level. And so then you put him into a game like this, and you're still looking for answers. I thought Denny Bouanga did Denny Bouanga things, which is to say, get in some dangerous areas, take the opportunities he had, but at the same point, like, there was some, just some sort of funky decisions in the final third. Nathan Ordaz and Jeremy Abobasi not left with a ton to do. David Martinez looking incredibly frustrated once he came on in the 38th minute. A lot of times was looking like he could be kind of in danger of getting some additional fouling as well. I don't know. I mean, there's only so much that you can really hope for from Hugo Lloris at this storied stage of his career in goal, and Olivier Giroud trying to pull on his shirt is good comedic gold. But this is generally what I expected. I expected Chelsea to put a pretty comfortable win in this group opener.
And that's what it was, right? This was comfortable for Chelsea. The difference between these teams was clear. Chelsea, there's a moment in the first half where Cole Palmer gets on the ball, and in the way that LAFC snapped to attention and like multiple players sprint to close him down was made it very clear to me that they'd been warned, right? And these guys aren't dumb. Like, they know who Cole Palmer is.
Right. Hey, this Cole Palmer guy.
But, like, the sheer amount of gravity that he had in that moment against multiple LAFC defenders compared to the gravity that Denny Bouanga, like the undisputed superstar of this team, one of the best players in Major League Soccer, the lack of gravity, the lack of impact that he had against Reece James 1v1 was exactly what you would have expected. Like, in so many ways, this game played down that line of, wow, yep, there's a huge gap here, just as we knew. At the same time, even with that gap, I still think LAFC conducted themselves quite well for parts of this game, where defensively, they weren't just overrun with chances in this game. Like yes, Chelsea created more and better chances. I think this was a fair scoreline at the end of the day. LAFC's box defending, I was pretty impressed with. The resolute nature of the center backs, Aaron Long and Eddie Segura, the fullbacks, Ryan Hollingshead and Sergi Palencia. I was actually very impressed with the fullback play for the most part. Yes, it's Hollingshead who gets beaten in behind by Pedro Neto for the opening goal. But, man, that whole sequence is made by Nicholas Jackson, like, holding up the play for a whole beat longer than any striker in MLS can, extending that play and giving Neto time to set up his run and run in behind. And at that point, I think it's over for Ryan Hollingshead. Basically, you're just praying that he misses. But I was impressed by the deeper box defending for LAFC. I was also impressed at times by their setup defensively in this game, where I'm gonna be nerdy tactically for just a second and give some credit to Steve Cherundolo. So Chelsea under Maresca set up almost always in a 3-2-5 shape in those established possession sequences, right? In this game, in the first half, it was Reece James who stayed deeper at right back to join the center backs. You had the double pivot of Caicedo and Lavia, and then you had Cole Palmer, and at first it was Cucurella as the two half-space attackers, and then you had Neto on one side and Madueke on the other side, and Nicholas Jackson in the middle. That 3-2-5 shape that I talk about all the time, it is still the most popular possession shape in the game right now. So Chelsea are in that setup, and LAFC are defending in a 4-3-3. So they only have three central midfielders, effectively, against the box midfield for Chelsea. Lavia, Caicedo, Cucurella, and Palmer. How do you compensate for that? Where do you find the extra number? And the way that LAFC did it at times, they used some cover shadows from the front three, but they would try to go man-to-man at times. And Igor Jesus would push forward from his number 6 role to mark either Caicedo or Lavia, while the other two, Tillman and Delgado, stood deeper on Cucurella and Palmer. So now you only have one more body that you have to fill, right? You got 3 of 4 boxes checked. And the way that LAFC did it is most often they would have the weak side winger drop back to go almost go man to man, or at least shade towards the last member of that box. And so all of a sudden you're at parity, right? At least in the midfield area. And it wasn't flawless. Chelsea still found their way through a few times, and you could still see the hesitancy from LAFC to go and close down all the way in midfield, because if you close down in midfield, you're leaving space somewhere else. And Chelsea were so effective at using that space somewhere else. But I thought that was like a legitimately clever tactical design to the defensive setup. There's a moment in the second half where Chelsea are only up 1 at this point. LAFC, I was sort of growing into the feeling of, are they going to get something from this game? Not because they deserved it necessarily, just because it felt like Chelsea didn't put this game to the sword.
Right, like exactly, like a classic example of a team like seeing 1-0 is good enough for us. Let's just like kind of comfortably ice this game, and then suddenly it's so easy. Like we've seen it so many times. I'm with you. Like up until that 79th minute winner, I consider it like it feels like a winner, right? Because that is the moment. Whereas to your point that you're in the middle of making, and I'll let you get back to it shortly.
No, it's all good.
That is like absolutely what the feeling of that second half was for the majority of it, and that's a testament to LAFC as well.
It really is, and there's the sequence that I'm thinking about is Igor Jesus steps up again from his number 6 role to go and mark a member of the double pivot for Chelsea, and I think it's Caicedo, and he just kind of out savvies Caicedo and like shifts around and pokes the ball away, and then then LAFC are counterattacking, and there were a half dozen maybe sort of mild half chances on the break for LAFC throughout this game. There were some moments of them controlling the ball. I just enjoyed the novelty that this game provided. Really, again, this felt very science experimenty. You could still see, to loop all the way back around, you could still see the obvious differences. Like the differences that everybody knew, including Don Garber, when he talked about the chances of his teams in this tournament against the best in South America and the best from Europe. To me, Jeff, those differences manifested in a couple of different ways. One was the technical level, and this is the most obvious one. Like this is the one that I would have thought about. Chelsea just have so many more dudes that can drive 1v1 than LAFC. Like if LAFC didn't have the ball on Denny Bouanga's foot, and then later on didn't have it on Bouanga's foot or David Martinez's foot, they were not attacking. Like they were not a threat to beat you whatsoever. And even Bouanga was so clearly the worst of the two players in his matchup with Reece James or with Malo Gusto later on. So the technical ability, to me, is one of those things. Guys who can drive 1v1, who can pass to the correct foot of the opponent, like the simple stuff, really, that makes great players great. The other thing, and this is something that I didn't expect to pop as much as it did, and I'm curious if you thought about this at all, the defensive quality and commitment and effort from every player, including Cole Palmer. Like Cole Palmer pressed way more than Denny Bouanga did in this game. Like Denny Bouanga was taking some plays off, tracking back into the defensive structure. Not a lot, not messy levels of taking plays off. But Chelsea were committed across the board. Like every player from that lineup was there to defend, and they were good at it. Like that, for me, was a huge contrast to see the difference in the average Chelsea player in that squad versus the average MLS player, not with all the technical skill-based stuff, but with like the effort and athleticism stuff too. I didn't expect, Jeff, for that to pop as much as it did to me.
It popped for me as well, even in the Seattle Botafogo game. It was another part that I think was actually maybe the most impressive. Yes, Botafogo is physical. Yes, Botafogo will win headers. Okay, sure, that's fine. We've seen teams do that. I think directly in line with what you're saying here about like Cole Palmer even puts in defensive effort. What's this about? I think what you can also surmise from this is that like it is costly to afford versatile, dedicated players, right? Yep. And I think that when I say that, I don't just mean that MLS DPs are brought in to be luxury pieces and they don't want to defend, right? Like in some cases, that's just absolute hogwash, right? Like that's just not the reality. You see it plenty of times where teams are able to find a guy who is involved in all phases. It's the 8th guy on your roster, the 9th, the 10th, the 11th. It's simple things like Botafogo. Anytime that they would regain possession, especially in the first half, as they were trying to establish their dominance over the Sounders, what they would do is they would collect the ball. And what you see on a counterattack in MLS is very often 5 players, up to 5 or 6 players will be involved in it in its main phase, right, in its first phase. And so you might have... Obviously, you might have 1 or 2, depending on where players are, right? If you're too much in your shell, you only have so much freedom to do this. That's fine. But usually you'll see the on-ball operator. You'll see 2 runners on either side, and you might see 2 people offering that sort of like safety valve right beneath them where you can pass it back, you can join the attack, and then we'll still try to do some like 5-a-side stuff, right? And what you see with Botafogo is not just the forward line advancing at breakneck pace, not just the midfield trying to fortify them, but the defense is so quick to say, this is our line and let's advance it. And let's bring our defensive line of engagement into our attacking half. So that if we turn the ball over, we've got a really staunch offside trap. But we also do have that option to recirculate, win the ball back, and still have attacking fortification and intentionality. And I think that because of the squad limits that MLS puts on its clubs, it's very difficult to be able to afford 11 players who can do that sort of involved in all phase movement and who are at that level, because they're expensive, because they are highly sought after at all levels of the game. And that is where you start to see the difference in Botafogo versus Seattle, and certainly Chelsea versus LAFC, where it's like, hey, we might have our preconceptions of what a Cole Palmer type player should do, but no, there he is, like, joining in the pressing schemes, and there he is, like, you know, it makes luxury players like Denny Bouanga look a little less robust, right? And that's a criticism I've lobbed against him for over a year, talking with you on this podcast and elsewhere, right? Where it's just like, you know, he's got that trick, and it's a fantastic trick, but how much is he doing for the rest of the team, and how much does it actually enhance the ability around? And I think you look at someone, you know, like, again, the Botafogo defenders made the attackers on Botafogo look better because they were playing in a way that set them up for success. And it's just a matter of finding that sort of recalibration. And I think that will be one of the major sort of benchmarks I look for moving forward of MLS's advancements in quality, is just like, when do you get to a point where you actually can afford to have a team of players that can play at that high of a level tactically and also just individually.
And one other way to think about it, I think that's a great point. One other way that I've been thinking about the difference just between the two superstars in this LAFC-Chelsea game relative to their own teams, right? Obviously, Cole Palmer is an infinitely better player than Denny Bouanga, just as Chelsea are obviously a better team than LAFC. I think about it as the difference between Cole Palmer and the next guy up in his spot, whether that's Enzo Fernandez, who comes in and plays in the half spaces, or Nkunku if he's ever healthy, or, you know, whatever, whoever, right? The difference between Palmer and the next guy is not that large, right? And certainly it is much smaller than Denny Bouanga to the next most impact attacker who LAFC can bring off their bench, right? That's what we're talking about here. Like the next guy who's not in the starting lineup. And even if you take it from Palmer to the next most valuable player in that Chelsea team, from Bouanga to the next most valuable player in that LAFC team, like, relatively speaking, percentage-wise, Bouanga is so much more valuable relative to his peers than Cole Palmer is to his peers, right?
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
That roster-building approach, right, that's how MLS rosters are built, where there's three dudes that you can spend as much as you want on. I mean, technically there's more than that, but the other ones have to be children, effectively. Like, really, there's three senior players.
38-year-olds who are taking ownership stakes for 5 years down the road.
Yeah,
right?
like,
it's one or the other.
Like, the Bouangas of MLS are making way more money than anybody else in their squads, more or less. I mean, they're making a lot of money, and much more than the people next to them in the locker room. And those guys are not incentivized by that structure to have to go out there and earn their spot. Like, if there's 8 LAFC players earning $5 million, close to what Bouanga is earning for LAFC, and Bouanga takes a day off of tracking back, well, there are consequences to that. If he's the only player making that kind of money in that locker room, and he decides he doesn't want to come and track back, and I don't think it was like a cardinal sin of his game in this one against Chelsea, excuse me. But like, if he doesn't come back, what, LAFC is just not going to play him? Like, they can't afford to do that. Literally, from an investment standpoint, that's not a great thing to do, and from an on-field talent standpoint, you're missing out there. So, an interesting contrast, I think, between these two teams. I really enjoyed this game, again, for the science aspect of it all. Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, and I will say, too, like, you saw a lot of that in Miami, to put a bow on it, because I actually don't think that there's a ton to say about that game right now. Sure. It's funny because it seems so important in the moment, whereas, like, wow, these two teams look like they're trying, and the atmosphere is kind of fun and stuff like that. But in now Miami. In Miami, thank you, at Hard Rock. But I think we've seen more games play where that's been more, where it's already kind of a forgotten factor. And so now you look at it, and it's pretty much just a 0-0, right? And it is a missed opportunity for Inter Miami to try to have some sort of, like, I know that we're the host and we would not be like a pot one team, so to speak, usually, but here we are and whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they got a very favorable draw. They are playing not at home. You know, like, I think it does make a difference that they're playing at essentially a neutral site. They're doing what a lot of MLS teams do to themselves when Miami comes to town, right? Where you book a bigger venue so that you can sell it out, but then you lose your home field advantage, and all of a sudden it's just like, okay, well, now what? And they're doing it to themselves, and it's not their choice. FIFA organized this tournament, right? But I think it's you could see it. And there was also a sort of, you saw more effort from the old guard, right? The old Barcelona guard than maybe you saw in other games. But it also led to some very weird trends. Like in the second half of the game, Miami smells in the water that there's a match winner to be had. So they're really pushing for it. Messi is doing his operating thing in the center. And Luis Suarez's tendency was to drift off to the left wing, not to the corner of the box on the left side. In case anyone didn't watch this game, he was fully in left wing territory to such an extent that when he got the ball, there was no shot on offer for him. There's no way he could have dribbled to a shooting position. And then once he passed the ball back to his left back to recirculate, because that was the only option to him, he was so far out of space that he couldn't even get involved in the final third. And that's not why Luis Suarez is on this team. But that's how his effort manifested, right? And so on the one hand, it's like, okay, it's good to see a little bit more of this. There was also just some really needless stuff with Suarez and Busquets. Like they were laughing at the referee and both of them got yellow cards within a 2-minute span because they very clearly were like, you owe us better calls because we're, I don't know, famous in hosting this tournament. Like it was just kind of that gross side of entitlement. That sort of played out, so that wasn't a good look from them, but very missed opportunity, I would say, for Miami, and a very credible point. I mean, Al outplayed them in the first half anyway, so in theory you would say they deserved at least 1 point, and I don't think you can't really argue that. Like they looked much better. They were pressuring Oscar Ustari with the one mistake that they kept shooting the ball directly at Oscar Ustari, which is generally the only place he can consistently make saves at this later stage of his career. So interesting kickoff, good kickoff, but we'll see how they fare in their next games against Porto and Palmeiras, because I think that those will be tougher tests.
Yeah, I've got two big takes on this game, and I want to get your thumbs up or thumbs down on them, Jeff, and then we'll move on. First take, I need to know what you think of this. Of the three MLS teams, Inter Miami got the best result, mathematic, you can't really argue with that, but should also be the most disappointed. Agree? Disagree?
Agree, fully.
Nice.
Yeah,
Good.
Because Seattle's disappointment is earned, right? You've earned the right to be disappointed because you left it out on the field. Miami, it's more like, oh, there's probably more we could have done there. I don't get why they don't play Fafa Picault more, man. And I know that this is a tale as old as time since this Miami Messi project kicked off, is American soccer writers saying, why don't they play the MLS veteran more? And why do they keep playing this newfangled old Argentine that they found? But alas, we are back to it. Fafa Picault is now Julian Gressel. I don't really get it because he adds so much dynamism to them in the final third and just forces teams to not play like they're setting up kind of a resting futsal defense where you're not trying to run as much and you're trying to get your positioning right and be as close as you can be to kind of poke the ball off them. That's pretty much how defenders have to play them because they don't have mobility unless Fafa Picault comes on, stretches the game, dynamic, winning headers, all these sorts of things that suddenly unsettles them. It makes so much sense, which means that Javier Mascherano will not start him.
Yeah, I'm getting some weird Mascherano vibes these days. My other take is that Sergio Busquets can't start for this team anymore if they're optimizing their chances to win games. Agree? Jeff is nodding. I'm going to assume that's an agree.
Yeah.
It's bad. Like the
it's
guy
bad.
The guy I think is pretty much done. Like he still can pass the ball like nobody's business, right? But he cannot move side to side. He cannot move forwards and backwards. And what's worse is that when he's partnered with Fede Redondo, Miami are just full-on traffic cones in midfield. I was really high on Redondo coming out of Argentina when he signed for Miami. He has not shown it yet. And he's still young, right? No. He's still 22. But the guy has not shown a lot of teeth, at least not when he's already within arm's reach of you, right? I mean, it's tough at times for this Miami team. I don't think that Busquets can start at least in the midfield for this team. If you want to get him on the field, put him as the center back or maybe just
you could maybe do something like that because his range of passing is long enough where he can make up for the 20 yard difference or whatever. Like I think you're right. That's probably the smartest place to put him because right now it looks a lot like Pirlo when he first got to MLS and was trying. It was like a 2-month experiment where he was actually trying to do Pirlo stuff and then he didn't jump for that one corner kick when he was the near post and it went right over his head and then it all fell apart, right? But, I think you can maybe do some of that with Busquets. Look, people have been a little harsher on, including myself, especially myself, I wrote a whole piece about this a month ago about Jordi Alba, right, and the defensive deficiencies there. But like, yeah, it can't go overlooked. Like the midfield is such an important place for them because they need to have that sort of central channel to get messy, consistent service. You can't constantly be doing that from the flanks. So I understand why they want to have him there. But at the same point, it is going to be very, very difficult to see this team defend a well-organized MLS engine room in the playoffs if Sergio Busquets is starting and playing 80 minutes or more every single game, which has been the trend for him since they signed him.
Yep. And most MLS teams are worse than Al Ahly, who were certainly the better team in this game overall. But yeah, not the strongest of starts to Miami when it certainly felt like there was something more on the table. They were second best in this game by a decent amount. Jeff, let's take one more break. And when we come back, I want to tie a bow on the Club World Cup chat. Then we'll take a look around the weird, wild world of the Major League Soccer regular season. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. I am in the process of tying a bow on this Club World Cup chat, Jeff, and I need your help.
Good form, by the way. I haven't really seen a technique like that in a long time.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to take the bunny ear around, and then I pull it through. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. It works for me. Yeah. The question I want to ask you, Jeff, to finish this out, and sort of works as the pivot into the MLS at large conversation. There's some Club World Cup teams that aren't here that I think FIFA would like to be, right? And we were talking about this a bit before we started recording. That Barcelona's not here because they didn't win the Champions League and weren't ranked highly enough. Tough. Yep. There are other Spanish teams that got in ahead of them. That Liverpool aren't here. I'm sure it is. And Arsenal, painful for FIFA. FIFA probably isn't shedding any tears about MLS teams not being in this competition. If you could reformat this, and if you could be FIFA and just pick 3 Inter Miamis or any 3 teams in Major League Soccer, who do you think would best represent MLS right now? Like, who are the 3 teams that you feel most confident about maybe having a better chance to get out of the group?
I think Columbus has to be the starting point, and I think that you would say it's kind of an accumulation of things. Like, yes, they've won trophies, so that does help, but I think it's also stylistically showing where MLS wants to go. It's like the idyllic version of how MLS sees itself, right? Where you can be a place where previously untested coaches can come in and put in these like systems that win hearts and minds, and it's kind of a collective mentality instead of being driven by retiring stars and all these things. And I think that you would have wished they would have replaced Cucho Hernandez by now, but maybe Cucho Hernandez doesn't leave until the summer if the Club World Cup's on the horizon and he can kind of cap his tenure at this tournament, right? So I think Columbus is the only team that I'm looking at, and it's like, yes, they need to be there. You know, like, yeah, you probably did need, like, Messi was always going to be involved in this, right? So like I concede that point, but like I think that the Sounders are a pretty credible representation of MLS's last 4 years, and I think that that's how I'd look at it ultimately, is like who have been the best teams of the 2020s so far. So LAFC also, right? Like, you know, they've been competitive on all fronts in that span as well. I mean, if you're going recency bias, you'll go with the Vancouver Whitecaps, right? But I think that they kind of needed a breather after the Champions Cup run. So I guess I would say that they were actually pretty close, and I think that if you just look at the 2020s, because again, like the way that they did this is basically look at 2021 through 2024, which is why you have like Salzburg and Juventus in this tournament, because they were the 8th and 9th best performing coefficient teams outside of the teams that won the Champions League, which is so convoluted and not how anyone thinks of the best teams in the world. And I'm really sorry. I'm actually like, Salzburg, whatever. At least you found someone from outside the Big Five in Europe. So like, I'm kind of fine with Salzburg being there just for like best of the rest or whatever. But man, what is Juventus doing here? Like, when you think of Juventus over the last, like, I don't know, decade, pretty much since that Champions League loss against Barcelona, when they had that, like, Andre Pirlo again in Arturo Vidal and Paul Pogba midfield, like, pretty much since then, it's just been kind of stepping on one rake after another and hitting themselves in the head and watching players leave because they're sick of getting hit in the heads with rakes. And, like, it's, it's just not terribly credible. So, yeah, there's a lot to figure out with this, but I guess I would say that Columbus is the one team I'm looking at, and, like, they should be here, just ideally from an MLS perspective.
Hey, if Jeff didn't say your team name, go yell at Jeff on social media. I think that's a completely defensible way to think about all of this. Also, Jeff, I don't appreciate you giving FIFA the idea to marry their coefficient system with a playoff that takes the highest rated coefficient teams in the last 4 years and mixes them with the next best teams who aren't auto-qualified from the past season. They play a pre-Club World Cup playoff a la LAFC and Club America. And then the winners of those, most likely the not Juventuses and RB Salzburgs of the world, and more likely the Barcelonas and the Liverpools of the world, go to the Club World Cup. And then we have more Club World Cup games. That's excellent work on your part, and I didn't like any of it. Let's shift our attention, Jeff, shall we, to the regular season. I want to start with a mini rant here.
Oh, this feels so much safer and cleaner. I'm so happy to be back to the MLS regular season.
It's like you just sat down in your comfy chair. Like, everybody's got a comfy chair.
Yeah.
You slipped on your smoking jacket, which I assume also everyone has.
Of course.
And it's just like... And now I'm going to rant, just very, very briefly. I might have done a similar rant back in March. It is so ridiculous that MLS plays through international breaks and tournaments, right? There were 40 players gone from around Major League Soccer this past weekend, where they played a full slate of games minus the Club World Cup teams, right? Like, this was match day 19 in Major League Soccer, trying to treat it as a normal match day from league channels, Apple TV, the league side, all of that stuff. This was business as usual for MLS teams. And it was not business as usual. Like, so many of the best players from around Major League Soccer were gone. In just one game, the Minnesota United-San Diego game, which I think was the game I was most looking forward to this weekend. Although the other game that I was most looking forward to has a great contention for this concept as well. In that San Diego Minnesota United game, Minnesota United missing 4 starters, including goalkeeper Dane St. Clair. San Diego missing 2 starters due to international break as well, in Luca De La Torre and I forget who the other one is. It's on the list somewhere. Like, these games were marked. Like, they were asterisked by the fact that MLS plays through international breaks. And as someone who wants to see these games matter, like winning in the regular season does matter. Teams that finish higher up the standings go and do better in the playoffs, whether that's because they're just better teams or whether that's because they actually take the things seriously and have momentum into the playoffs. Whatever it is, the higher seeds, home field advantage, all that stuff, it matters. Like, winning regular season games matters. Yeah. It is so difficult to take the regular season seriously when even before you get to the unbalanced schedule of it all, which matters for things like the Supporter Shield and for things like seeding and all of that stuff that matters in the playoffs, even before you get to that giant elephant in the room, you're faced with the fact that not all regular season games are created even close to equal because teams are playing with such lopsided rosters in windows like this one. The other game that comes to mind for me is Vancouver-Columbus, where, again, these teams are missing real players. And it's not always balanced, right? In this game, Vancouver lose this match. Just their second loss of the regular season so far. Their first one, by the way, came back in March during an international break to the Chicago Fire, where Vancouver were missing 4 starters. Loss number 2 for Vancouver comes when they're missing Ali Ahmed, Seb Berhalter, Jaden Nelson, and Brian White, all to international duty.
Important.
Very important players in this team. Columbus are missing players too. They're missing good old Max Arfston for the U.S. men's national team, and Nicholas Hagen, their backup goalkeeper. They're missing a couple of guys to international duty, but it's 1 starter to 4. And Columbus win this game 2-1, and Vancouver now see their grasp on the Shield start to slip away from them. Like, it could not be more clear to me, Jeff, that MLS does not care about its regular season offering, right? They continue to expand the playoffs. They add Leagues Cup, all these other things that would leave more room to not play in the international breaks. They have added more and more things to the calendar instead of trying to give their regular season light. And that's fine. Like, if they want to make that decision, that's their decision to make. I'm also going to make the decision to think that it's very dumb and you're almost ruining the biggest set of games that you have that you should be working towards actually building up instead of tearing down. To me, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the regular season always feels like this thing that they have to keep on a simmer on the stove while they're cooking something much more interesting on the side, and then it's like, we'll get back to that. We'll get back to the soup. Well, the soup can be the best part of the dish sometimes. It's the most consistent part, right? And I think that you look at what you have with the Minnesota game, the San Diego game, because I watched that one as well while I was at like a Club World Cup event. Whatever, I had it on my phone.
We get it. You go to cool events. Probably got a wristband, free food. I'm not jealous. Move on.
I paid for my beer, actually.
All right,
Thank you very much. But there's, when a team is without its goalkeeper, and they have decided to build their roster without a backup goalkeeper, which I don't know what that is about for Minnesota United, but they have not held like a true backup goalkeeper. They've pretty much had next pro kids and a like graduated next pro goalkeeper who had never really played much in MLS besides one really bad showing against DC last year. I digress. They gave him his MLS debut against one of the best teams in the Western Conference, And unsurprisingly, the first 4 goals in this game were pretty much all goalkeeper howlers, including a penalty that went like just directly underneath the goalkeeper, right? And it's not a good look for San Diego that CJ Dos Santos is involved in 2 of these howlers, and he is their starting goalkeeper. But I think that we've always known that that's an area that they would maybe want to upgrade over time. But the results just don't feel as credible. To an extent, when you look at it, and it's just like, okay, you have someone who's, been playing for the next pro team. He's 23, and he's never talked to any of these defenders before in training. So, like, how is this going to go? How is he going to get that sort of coverage? The San Diego player I think that you were alluding to, who is missing, along
Godoy.
with Luca Tolentore, was Anibal Godoy, right? And so, like, then of course you have a midfield, and they have Tverskov, who's looked very good this year. He gets an assist as well. So, like, good for San Diego there, but like, it's a very different sort of matchup. Things look very off center. Minnesota didn't really have its usual sort of change of approach with Tanya Loishei, who's gone with Canada as well, right? And then you just look at some of the other games, like, I don't know. It's just, it sucks because there's some very genuinely fun matchups. I think that you would look and say, like, Philadelphia-Charlotte is a game that at full strength is pretty telling about where the Eastern Conference is at outside of Ohio and Florida, where we've kind of always assumed that the epicenter of the East will be this year. Or certainly since the game started, Atlanta looked like crap. You've got Columbus-Vancouver, which could have been one of the most entertaining games of the year that is just absolutely neutered by, a lot of this. The Revs, who were unbeaten in 9 entering this weekend, lost. Gonna
have to change our group chat name, Jeff.
I know.
That's a real
We
mistake.
really will. We can change it to Nashville is unbeaten in 9 and 11 in all competitions. So there's hope for that group chat yet. Hi, Taylor. Miss you. Portland, San Jose usually is a very good game. And, like, the XG balance is like, really good. But, like, at the same point, it's just, I think that the bigger point is that Portland, San Jose game maybe is a game that on a normal weekend, you say MLS After Dark, let's throw this on. But people's minds aren't there because 3 of your teams are in the Club World Cup, and suddenly, like, as of a week ago, MLS has suddenly been like, oh, we should really pump people towards the Club World Cup. We forgot to do that. We should really push people towards that. And you've been getting more activations in these markets. A phrase I absolutely hate, activations. You get more, press releases and have your writers kind of reassigned from covering the league to covering this, and your pundits are supposed to talk about it on broadcast and all that stuff. So, ultimately your own product seems far less important, and I think it would have been very, very easy for any fan of MLS, but especially fans of Seattle, LAFC, and Inter Miami to completely check out on Major League Soccer this weekend and feel like they didn't miss a thing, and that's not a good thing either.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. Like, I want to be a Shield truther. I really do. I love that the Shield recognizes teams for playing consistently excellent soccer. MLS Cup, you can win it as a team that's pretty good but not quite great, and you get hot at the right time, and that's fun too, right? There's a place for that. But when it comes to identifying the best team, I want the Shield to be that. Like, I want to be that. But all regular season games, like I said before, are just not created equal. The Whitecaps, if all these games are created equal, the Whitecaps would probably be in the midst of an invincible season right now, right? Where they're more than halfway through their schedule, and you're thinking, this team could make history. And instead, they've got 2 losses on their schedule. The one over the weekend came with exactly 1 outfield player over the age of 22 on their bench. Like, this is... Sometimes MLS is unserious, and I guess we can put a pin in it there because we can rant on this for longer.
We can, and we will just a little bit longer, because I think you're right. Like, I want to be a Shield truther too, because I think you're right. Like, in theory, this is the best way to determine the best team, but there's just too many teams in this to do a balanced schedule now. They passed that point, and I think it was 2015 when they had 19 and 20. Pretty much ever since then, since Orlando and New York City, they haven't been able to keep a balanced schedule. And so when more of these things happen, like, it does put more stock in MLS Cup is the more meaningful trophy, because I think if nothing else, it has the better story, right? Because right now, what is the story of winning Supporter Shield? Well, we didn't have a lot of internationals, and so when we had to play through the Club World Cup and the Gold Cup at the same time, well, okay, we had our full strength 11, so we picked up some cheap points, and here we are, right? Like, that's not as fun of a story as Portland Timbers going double doink in the first round in a shootout against Sporting Kansas City, and then being able to sort of build their momentum organically like that and then win their first MLS Cup. That's just a better story, right? So, of course, inevitably MLS Cup is going to be how a season is determined. But now there isn't really much of a discussion that we can credibly have about the Shield on the other side. And I think that's been a pretty recent sort of pivot where it's been especially like, okay, well, and it's because they keep adding teams. So the schedule imbalance, points per game against, all that sort of things, like it's so out of sort right now. It's a bummer. I don't think that's necessarily the competitive format a lot of us would design.
Well, and even MLS Cup always has the edge in these discourses because one game knockouts, once you get past the first round, always have better narratives anyway. And it comes last, right? It comes last. Right. It's always the thing freshest in the mind. So the Shield already has a large mountain to climb, but it doesn't help when MLS is making it more difficult for those of us that actually want to sink our teeth into and care about and talk about the regular season. I find that to be frustrating. Jeff, you mentioned Nashville. Unbeaten in 9, I hear. Just like the Reds were up to a point. They beat the Chicago Fire. Yeah, gotta love that. They beat the Fire 2-0 in Chicago over the weekend. It is funny to me that BJ Callahan's team continues to beat Greg Berhalter's team just from a funny online too much perspective.
Optics and vibes, yeah.
Nashville are a real team, dude. Like they have the second best expected goal differential in the Eastern Conference behind the Philadelphia Union. The DPs are going and scoring and playing good soccer as this team as a whole is playing good soccer. Jeff, I'm impressed by what this Nashville side's cooking up.
That's, really all you need to say. The DPs finally look like they're working together. Like Cincinnati, take note, there are brighter days ahead between your kind of mismatch stylistically of a star striker and a proven MLS number 10 designated player, because they look so good right now. Like it looks, I don't know what trust fall exercises Hani Mukhtar and Sam Suric have been working on this last offseason, because they suddenly look much more in lockstep than they did for their first year and a half. Suric looks like, a lot of times Suric has looked like what kind of a finesse poacher, where it's just he's pretty much British Wando, like through his first year and a half, where it was like if you get him in the right spot, it'll be really useful, and if you're able to get him the ball with the right patterns of service, it's great. However, his avenues were more limited than Wondolowski's, who I think was much more of a grinder and was able to create those opportunities for himself to a better extent than Sam Suric has been, who looks like it's more of a first or second touch, and if he can't take a shot in that time, he should pass it off, right? This year, he looks like he knows where he should be moving. And so this is also a credit to BJ Callahan for maybe giving him better marching orders, right? But I think that you have so much clarity in the final third of how they can threaten you. Not just what they want to do, but how they can actually make a team sweat defensively, which is new and difficult. A team like Chicago, they haven't gotten really to improving their defense yet. They really focus their build on get the attack in a much better way. Let's support Hugo Kuipers the best way we possibly can, and then let's go with the midfield gradually over time, and we'll get to the defense when we get to it, which has been pretty much the Chicago Fire's motto since 2005. We'll get to the defense when we get to it. So that's fine. But I think Nashville has credibly become a viable threat. I think that at this point in the Eastern Conference, I'm more confident in them than Miami, for example, in a knockout bracket, because I also do think that they have those big game talents, and they have defensive shape, and they have Andy Nahar, who is like suddenly one of the best creative players in the league again, like a decade later. And so like that's just good, clean, wholesome fun for everyone. But yeah, I think overall, again, it is granted still the Chicago Fire. They're still a team that's in transition. They're still a team that's figuring themselves out and building towards something that is not going to probably be achieved in 2025 alone, which is good. They needed that sort of long-term patience and process, but Nashville, I think, is in a very, very good way right now, both with their squad build and then also how they're playing under Callahan.
Yeah, I'm very, very impressed by what Nashville have done, and we've talked about that before on this show. One of the biggest surprises for me of 2025, and I think basically everybody there deserves a ton of credit for the season going as well as it's going. Right now, they're sitting third in the Eastern Conference, which I just did not expect to say at any point during this season. For me, Jeff, the other big story from MLS of the last few days is in Portland, and that is Jonathan Rodriguez going out and Tom Bogert reporting that he's going to have a season-ending knee surgery. It's gonna put him on the season-ending injury list, which in some ways is a good thing for Portland, because it means they can go and add somebody in the summer window in that DP spot if they want to. Now, Tom was very
clarity
careful.
Of like, do we make a move or not? You're right. Yeah,
yes, now they have the door open, right? That is a good thing for Portland. Now, Tom was very careful in the wording of his reporting, I would imagine, because there was a line in there about they're only going to sign a DP Portland if it fits with their long-term plans, which you'd have to imagine includes David DaCosta, and may or may not include Jonathan Rodriguez, although it's going to be real hard to move an injured over 30 high-priced attacking player, so maybe they go 3-3 next year instead of 2-4, which is where they are now. I don't know how you find a DP that fits in your long-term plans if you're not going 3-3, which we'll see what happens on that front. I wouldn't take it as a given that Portland are going to go out there and sign somebody, although I'm sure they would like to. I'd held out hope, Jeff, that the Timbers were going to get J-Rod back and firing. I think I'm the only one who calls him that, but I like it. I'm not going to stop.
I like it too. Yeah, keep it.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you, especially. Instead of getting Rodriguez back, man, I see I chickened out last second, had it, left it on the table. Now they're facing what is going to be a regression, right? They draw 1-1 against San Jose.
Yes.
They are vastly overperforming their expected goal differential. Data Hive assemble, which Portland fans took issue with when I put it on social media. That's fine. Totally understand.
Facts matter.
My guess is that they are going to regress a little bit. And now they don't have a clear sight line on someone who can give them a boost. Like, they are still, I think, Portland, a pretty good team. They'll make the playoffs. They've banked a bunch of points this year. They had a chance to do some damage in the West with how many points they banked. If they could get Rodriguez back and firing sooner rather than later, that would take a little bit of the pressure off of Anthony that I don't think he can sustain his current pace. And David Acosta, we know, is not Evander, although he does impact the game in other ways. He's not making up for Evander's attacking production by running a little harder, right? Even though we did that whole thing earlier on running, and that does matter.
Yeah.
Like, I am worried about Portland in a way that I wasn't before, which is, I'll admit, it's a negative formulation of looking at the Timbers. There's a world in which they sign somebody in the summer window, and obviously that player is going to give them more than J-Rod, who I think has 2 goal contributions in 130 minutes.
That's right.
Even if that player doesn't hit the ground running, they're probably going to give you 2 goal contributions in those last 8 regular season games following the playoffs. But man, a lot of things. They have to find that player. That player has to come in. That player has to perform at a decent level to combat the regression that's coming in. And to me, it all feels like it's going to happen just a little bit too late. I think Portland could survive this year and even do quite well by losing Evander. To lose Evander and Rodriguez, even if you've replaced both of those players, you're replacing them with worse players. Like, almost certainly with worse players, because it's hard to find guys who are as productive as Evander and J-Rod. I'm worried for Portland in a way that I wouldn't have been if you told me that Rodriguez was going to come back in a month. Like, that's just the reality right now.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be worse than the best version of themselves, could have been this year because of this injury, even if they go out there and take a swing in the summer. So I'm bummed out for Portland right now. I think they're in a tough spot.
I think that's entirely fair, right? Like you said, we just didn't get to see a lot of J-Rod. We're gonna make it a thing.
Yep.
You know, like less than 150 minutes is not going to be his big impact, especially after scoring 16 goals last year, right? Like it's such a drop off that they were already sort of figuring out life without J-Rod for much of this year, which does give them some advantages. Anthony on the left wing in that same position that Rodriguez played a lot of last year, has looked pretty good. 6 goals, 8 assists is certainly looking very good. So that's probably an understatement as well. I think what's going to be interesting about the fit is that every single one of their every player on their team, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players who have taken at least 10 shots this year so far. 6 of them are 25 or younger. And so, like, you kind of wonder that, like, it's almost the thing where it's like, even as I'm sitting here looking at that, like, I'm overthinking this now. And it's like, okay, do we need someone who's dynamic, someone else who's kind of youthful, can fit into, like, good vibes gang, not someone who comes in and kind of has to act like a substitute teacher almost and throws off the good vibes of the room? Or do you have to bring in someone who's older and just say, okay, we have our future established. So if we're talking about long-term plans, who's someone who's going to maybe like brush off on them and they'll pick up something or, work really well with them, used to be a similar type of player, so it'll help a couple of them with their evolution. I still don't really get Kevin Kelsey as an MLS striker. I know that he's scoring goals, but it's the second straight year where I feel like people are trying to tell me I have to get really excited about Kevin Kelsey, and I can't.
You don't.
I'm not. Yeah, I can't do it. I'm sorry. So maybe it is as simple as a center forward who's a little bit more. I mean, like Felipe Mora has a good shot rate. Like 63% of his shots end up on target.
Yeah, Mora's a good player.
Yeah, but do you try to find someone else in that spot so that you don't have to kind of offset that sort of Anthony Moreno DaCosta midfield line, going left, right, center, I guess, as I say it? Like it's a really, really difficult sort of panic stations thing that carries so much stakes that you almost feel like the team can't not try, right? To do something. It's just like it's going to be a very difficult needle to thread, I think, just with all of the factors around this decision.
Yeah, I firmly believe that summer window signings, almost all of them, there's the odd exception that is agreed to, the players in market and training and ready to go when the window opens and they can officially be registered and they can play. Outside of that scenario, I'm a pretty firm believer that players signed in the summer are for next season, as the MLS calendar is constructed. And I think Portland need a lift now because I think they're starting to slip. And that's just not going to happen for them. So I'm a bit bummed out about the Timbers. Jeff, I'm not bummed out.
It might I will say, just real quick, with that in mind, it might be a good instance for the cash market to represent itself, depending. I can't remember. I don't think Portland's made a second move, right? So, like, they've still got some bandwidth and flexibility besides the Evander move, where I think if they wanted to dip back into that well and bring in someone, I don't have a name off the top of my head, but I think that might be an easier way to assume that they can make an impact this year if they played in the league, rather than buying from abroad. So that's like an interesting wrinkle that's pretty new this year, is that mid-season market of cash transfers might be very, very interesting.
That's a phenomenal take, and I desperately want to spend 30 minutes dreaming up who that player is. We will save that for a future show.
Next week, we're going to have to talk through another international break.
100%. Well, Jeff, let's do just that. But first, before we do that, I have to thank you. Thank you for joining me and becoming the other half of the dynamic duo.
Yes.
The Alex Roldan to my Christian. No, it's not.
I'll take it.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't feel right. The Jordan Morris to my Christian Roldan on today's.
This is the second time in this episode you've backed off comparing yourself to Christian Roldan.
It just doesn't. It doesn't feel right. Actually, what got me there is I don't think it was fair to you to compare you to Alex in that scenario. Like that doesn't sit right with me. Alex Roldan, great soccer player. Regardless, Jeff, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being here. Glad you made it back from Seattle. You're the best.
Thank you. You're the best. Thanks for having me, man. This is great.
Awesome. Well, listeners and Hugh, shout out Hugh in Seattle. We appreciate you listening to this episode, and we'll be back again later this week.